Hello again, and welcome to the corner studio here in my garage. And today we're talking about this camera right here. This is the Nikon Z50ii, and it's been out of the box only a few days. We got it set up, and I took it out yesterday and I shot some sample clips with it, and I felt like it was time to do a first impressions video on it. So what I want to do is come around a little closer to the camera, and we'll hold this up so you can get a better look at it. I've got the Z50ii today situated with the 14 to 30. This is a full frame camera lens. It's an S-line lens. I prefer full frame lenses to DX lenses. I've owned some DX lenses. I'm not going to knock the DX lens line, but I prefer the full frame line. And the good thing about Nikon is the camera mount here that I'm pointing at the edge of, this camera accepts full frame or DX size lenses, no problem. So that's a great feature when you're buying kind of a starter camera, is that later you'll be able to use a higher quality lens on here if you decide to do so. So this is the sizing of the camera. It is kind of tidy and compact in your hand. I like the build quality. I've already put the Peak Design buttons on it. This is the strap I'm going to use. I think they call this one the leash. It's kind of a minimalist design. The plate that I chose, the Arca plate for the bottom, I really like this plate, by the way. This is a Leo Photo brand, and it came with a tripod that I no longer have. So even though I traded the tripod off, I kept this plate because you can see it just works wonderfully with the Z50ii. The door has no problem opening to get to the battery and to the card. This is a single SD card, and it's a 20.1 megapixel. And I tell you what, let me get back behind the desk here, the workbench, and we'll talk more about this camera. The screen, of course, articulates out and it flips over, so you can see yourself while you're filming. I don't use the camera very much like that, but I do like to take the screen and kind of orient it. Sometimes, particularly here in the studio, I like to look at the screen rather than the viewfinder. Out in the field, I'm kind of the reverse of that, and I really prefer the setup on the Z8 screen where it hinges out. It's just a difference in preference, and you can't look at the Z8 screen when you're in front of the camera. So, you know, the world's full of trade-offs. By the way, we're shooting with the Nikon Z8 with the 24 to 120 lens on it. This camera here is not going to displace the Z8 by any means, and it's not even a second or a backup camera because I have a second Z8 that I have for my second or backup camera. This camera, its role is kind of an auxiliary camera that I might take when I don't want to carry weight, but primarily I'm planning to use this as a studio camera, and it's got to earn its way if I'm to carry it out in the field. The only advantage it would have in the field is its size and its weight. And speaking of that, the camera body itself is about 17 ounces, so just a little bit over a pound. A couple of reasons that I waited to order this camera. When it first came out, I was concerned about its lack of IBIS. I was hoping Nikon would make a higher quality APS-C size sensor camera, and they left the IBIS off of this. Well, that concerned me, and I kind of stopped considering the camera for a while. The other thing, I've got my cheat sheets here, is the lack of weather sealing. I don't really know from reading the specs and from what Nikon has said about this camera what its weather capabilities are. I'm going to keep it out of the rain and getting wet and all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't recommend it with this camera. Of course, the Z8 and the Z9 are supposed to be completely weather sealed, but we're talking about a different camera at a different price point. And this is a camera that cost about $909 for the camera body, something like that, plus sales tax. Here in Washington State where I bought it, the price point on it was right up at $1,000 once sales tax was added. So those are the two things, the lack of IBIS and the lack of weather sealing, that kind of turned me off about the camera. However, the IBIS, if you're shooting a short lens like this is the 14-30 zoom, and of course the APSC equivalent, that's full frame lens numbers. The APSC equivalent would be 21 to 45 on this lens. You don't really need IBIS to hold this lens still, particularly if you're taking pictures. Now for shooting video, I don't think you'll have any trouble holding it still for short clips. If you're going to shoot at much longer focal lengths, I tested the 28 to 400 lens on the camera. The 28 to 400, the equivalent APS-C math would be 42 to 600. So you put the 28 to 400 lens on there, you've got all the way out to 600 in full frame equivalent. That's a nice tidy sum for a lens that's this compact. The lens has VR, so this lens is going to help you keep the camera still, basically. It's going to help you capture your image without needing IBIS in the camera. I did shoot this free-handed a little bit with the camera. I was reasonably satisfied with the results. However, I did most of my testing that we'll look at later on a tripod, and I typically tend to shoot wildlife on a tripod. I have found in the past that I can hold the camera pretty steady for about 10 to 15 seconds, and I can usually edit a clip out of that 10 to 15 seconds that's like maybe 6 to 8 of decent steady footage, but beyond that I feel like I need to use a tripod. However, with this lens on this camera, you still are at about 3 pounds or a little less, and it's not a hard rig to hold still. Now, some of the positives of this camera, this uses the same sensor, the XPEED 7, that Nikon puts in way more expensive cameras like the Z8 and the Z9. This camera reminds me a lot of the Nikon Z6 II. When I got it out of the package and I was just holding it, looking at the sizing, I was in the Z6 II for a couple of years, and this camera sort of seems like a baby Z6 II. There's kind of an interesting product review mode, which we won't test at this time, but it's supposed to be able, if you're in front of the camera and then you want to hold something up, the camera will give a better rendition of focusing. It has some improved software. Haven't tested that feature yet, but it's kind of on the back of my mind whether here in the studio I might make use of that when I'm doing arts and craft videos. But let's talk about the sample clips. There's not very many of them. I shot some static items with the short lens here, the 14 to 30, and why don't we just take a quick look at those. All right, we've seen those clips with the 14 to 30. Now let's take a look at some of the short wildlife clips I shot with the 28 to 400. And most of that was shot with this at 400, meaning it gave us a 600 millimeter full frame equivalent. Okay, so we've just kind of given a basic rundown of the camera and some samples with the two different lenses, and by no means are we through using this camera or trying to figure it out. It's a sophisticated little camera. I found this camera has a lot more features than the Z30 seemed to. The Z30 kind of reminded me of a rig that you could just kind of turn on, sort of plug and play. If you set that camera to automatic, you're ready to go. They have that automatic setting here on the Z50, and I think you could get to shooting video or photos pretty quick by just leaving everything in automatic. You see, maybe if you can see it, I had the dial set to P here. We have programmed some preferences, and we'll talk about that in later videos. It's not really a first impressions topic, but I find that I'm getting along with this camera, and I appreciate what you spend for it, you know, according to how much you're actually getting with the camera body. And I think if you look online, try to check some of the competitors to this camera, like the Canon R10 and the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. You get a lot of bang for your buck right here with the Nikon Z50 II, and I think this camera is going to be a great addition here. I know I'm going to enjoy it here in the studio, and it has yet to sort out whether this is a type of camera that we'll just grab and take on day trips, or maybe once in a while, if I don't feel like carrying a bag, carrying this to the field. But that kind of stuff we don't know for first impressions video. We've got to just use the camera, try different lenses on it, and kind of suss out where this thing's going to shake out. But it certainly has impressed so far, and we'll certainly have more to talk about with this camera and some different lens combinations. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon in another video. So till then, take care.